Hollywood, California, Meltdown Comics and Collectibles presents The History of the Batman with Londyn, reliving the defining moments of one of the most iconic figures in comic art and literature, the Batman. 75 plus years of history we are going to be bringing to you with the wonderful, the fabulous, the lovely Londyn. Londyn, tell the world a little bit about who you are.
Well, hey, everyone listening. I'm really just like probably all of you guys listening. I'm a huge comic book fan. I have been since I was little. I just started reading comics and looking at the animated series and all the movies of all superheroes, not just Batman. I'm not just a DC person. I'm a Marvel and all kinds. And I really started getting into comics in a more critical aspect when I studied as an art historian at Loyola Marymount University. I started in 2008, graduated in 2013, and it all really started with having to research about World War II propaganda and how it was kind of implemented into comic books and how heroes such as Captain America came into play for Marvel and pretty much his role as giving support to the American troops overseas. And I saw this not just with Marvel, but with also Superman and Batman and Robin and World's Finest, supporting war bonds, and all of the art that I loved even before had a new meaning. It represented more than just someone drawing it. It had a context, and that really fascinated me, and I wanted to learn more about it. So I studied pretty much American pop art in the 1960s. My favorite was Lichtenstein and Warhol, and how they used the comic book medium pretty much to get out their own ways of presenting their art. And that's pretty much where I got more just pretty much into comic books.
Okay, well, wow. I mean, first of all, that is amazing. So talk a little bit first about the fact that you studied art history.
Right. When I went into LMU, I just studied history, just in a general sense. But I took a course on modern art, and I figured seeing all of this art, it all is connected to some type of context within history, whatever period, from Renaissance to modern. And I really loved putting those two things together, looking at an artwork, looking at the artist and what they were trying to represent within their artwork and how it reflected either on the times or what they were going through. And that kind of felt like the same thing to me with comic book art. When any writer or artist, presents any type of hero, I feel that they're trying to send out some type of message within that story, even if it just seems like a simple, we have to catch the bad guy before they rob another bank in Gotham, or, we have to save Metropolis from this giant monster that Lex Luthor has created with LexCorp. I feel that there's always an underlining meaning with any story that you find, even if it's either silly or dark. And so I always loved how comics can kind of, they're not just for kids, first of all. I mean, there's obviously a huge audience that, it ranges from kids from the age of 10 to the age of 80,
right?
And I think comics, are still so popular today because it kind of can connect people to certain things happening in the world, or just to their own, what's going on with them and relating to the characters, relating to the stories. And so, studying art history, you study all of it.
Right.
You start from the beginning, with the cave paintings and wall paintings and things like that, and you go through all the periods, and then you pretty much narrow it down to what you are interested in.
Right. So that's where the comic books came in for you.
Right.
So real quick, just to backtrack here.
Of course.
So my name's Adam Silverstein. I am Chief Experience Officer here at Meltdown. And we are super proud to present this History of the Batman podcast where you, Londyn, get to really kind of just add another element to what you've already established. Now, you did mention a bit about the art history and what you studied in school. You went to LMU.
Right.
Fantastic. So you've got some credentials here. But talk a little bit. We're going to get into how you got into Batman, specifically in comic books in your early life, but talk a little bit about what you've been doing. I mean, we came to you and you came to us. We've kind of had a working relationship or friend relationship. It's been something here because you kind of been in tune with what Meltdown is about, and we've been in tune about what you're about. But tell us a little bit about the social media stuff that you're doing that kind of brought us together.
Okay. Well, it all started pretty much with a fan page. I started it in January of 2013, so about a little over 2 years ago. And I was, at the time, actually studying and focusing on Egyptology. And I had my own Tumblr just talking about, different monuments and just all different types of history with that, and providing visuals and then giving full content, backgrounds and things like that. It kind of played into what I was studying. And I wanted to do that with Batman because he was my favorite. And so I tried to look for that on Instagram, which at the time I was just like learning about, and I had my own personal page and things like that. But I wanted to find, everyone posts these beautiful pictures, but I wanted to see something that had more content to it. If you see a cover, who did it and why did they do it and what is it a part of, and kind of put it in a perspective and not just
So you're
art.
effectively telling the story behind the picture.
Exactly. Because Instagram is, of course, based just on, pictures. That's what you post. So I decided, I had probably about a day off from studying, and I just created a page, and my very first post was Detective Comics 27 from 1939. And I didn't do every single comic in order, but I just kind of started off with the first, his first year in Detective Comics, because he was by himself until Robin came in, and I just started, just in order. Did 39, did 40, and I did it for about a few months, and I got a lot of great feedback. I started the page really for me.
Real quick, what was some of the feedback you were getting?
People liked the fact that they were getting information more about Batman, because they're like, oh, we know that it's Detective Comics 27, but they may not have even known what the story was about. They know, okay, that's the comic where, he's swinging through the air and has this bad guy in his arm.
And purple gloves?
Yes, purple gloves, the gray and blue suit and, the swept cowl and all of that. And they can visualize the cover, but they may not know what's inside. And we all know that with comic books, the cover is pretty much the selling point. So I wanted to show more than just that, maybe panels, or talk about just the development of the character itself, and kind of in a chronological order, not just at random, not start with the 30s and then go to the 70s. And it kind of makes sense. But people were saying, I like this format. I haven't seen anything like this on Instagram, and I like learning more about Batman that I didn't know before, like stories or about when certain characters first emerge, just like their first appearances. That's always popular and things like that.
So you would take a picture or some kind of the cover of the issue of Batman, post it on Instagram, and then write a little blurb on what that was about?
Pretty much. It would be just, if it was Detective Comics 27, I would say, this is the title of it. It came out this year, the writer and the artist, and then just pretty much a quick synopsis in general of what the story was about. And it's, it's not a thing of trying to give spoilers away to anyone, but it's more of just giving a general feel for someone who wants, who's interested. And then they go in, they're like, I want to read this. And they may go out and read it themselves or look more into it.
Would you give more than just a synopsis of the story? Would you give some context about the historical setting in which it's done or things of that nature?
Oh, definitely. Especially when I first started, I focused more on the creators of Batman. You know, I talked a little bit about Bob Kane and how he was a comic news strip artist, and how after Superman was created, that they wanted to bring in another superhero and kind of his inspirations, and then how Bill Finger came into the picture and transformed the look of him. So it depended on the time period. Every era gave more background. So once you got into the 40s and you know, World War II came to a head, you know, that definitely played into the postings. And that would be, you know, after I post a comic, I'll like talk about, you know, the time period and why, you know, you'll see Superman and Batman and Robin throwing, you know, stuff at that Japa Nazis, which is so not PC for today.
Right.
But things like that you see represented just what was happening in the time.
Right.
And just how when characters emerged, such as Robin, you know, when he first came in, he was brought in to make Batman less dark, because he was just a masked vigilante wielding, you know, a gun, and he you know, he killed, and he was kind of vicious. He was a really dark Pulp Fiction type of character. But once he became so popular and they wanted to get a younger audience, they introduced Dick Grayson.
Isn't that kind of also so interesting how when Frank Miller then came and turned him dark again?
Exactly. It's just every era it's been from dark, and then it got really, really light. But then from that Silver Age kind of light gimmicky thing, we, you know, got the Batman live action show, which took Batman from one place just in comics and made him a cultural icon. Right. And, you know, and so even though some people prefer the dark Batman, you know, that's all gritty, you know, they don't like when he's smiling on a cover, or, you know, the G gollies that are everywhere that were in the 50s and 60s, all of it represents a time in Batman, and it's all important because it's the character. It's the character, and it's so dynamic. It's not just been, you know, a stable, you know, this is just how he is.
Right. So also let me ask you this then.
Sure.
You've done the covers, but you've done more now than just covers and stayed in a chronological order. Is that correct?
Yes.
What are you doing now? Where do you see the postings that you're doing now? Because I see that you do video games, you talk about toys, you talk about a number of things that are related to Batman,
right.
Not just a chronological order.
Right. And I usually, if I do a particular, each week it'll be something new. Usually in the beginning of the week, I'll stick to the actual chronological order. Like right now, we're in the year 2012. And so I'll cover maybe the beginnings of New 52 publications. But from like Nerd Wednesday on, I'll pick a topic. And I cover everything from the comics to film to the video games to toys to merchandising, anything that is relevant to the topic. Like a couple weeks ago, I did Batman and video games, and just started from his first 8-bit in 1986 to how Arkham Knight's going to come out in June, and how that itself, the visuals and the gameplay and everything kind of evolved. You know, Batman isn't just in comics, and a lot of people have only maybe seen the movies or have only played the video games. There's so many different generations that follow that I've learned that some people's first introduction was the 1989 Tim Burton movie with Michael Keaton and Jack Nicholson, but then other people's was, you know...
The Lego Batman.
Right, Lego Batman, or even just the Nolanverse, those movies. That might have been their first introduction. And so I like to add in more things, especially with comics, because if you like the movies so much, and I would feel like you would want to know what inspired the movies.
Right. Most people always say the book is better.
Right.
And that's probably true for a lot of comic books.
Right. And a lot of times with the movies, it takes from so many different sources, you know, comics and even television, that it's it's just interesting to see how maybe your favorite part of Batman developed from things that were created years prior to its existence. So
how often do you post?
Pretty much daily. And I usually do an intro, like a good morning or a good afternoon, just saying hi to everybody and giving an overview of like, this is what we're going to talk about today. And then I try to do about 2 to 3 posts depending on what we're talking about. And then if there's any breaking news or anything, comes up, then, I'll talk about it.
Right. You mentioned to me off the air about the importance of accurate breaking news.
Right.
Tell me a little bit about that philosophy.
Well, right now, especially with the DC cinematic universe kind of getting itself together, every day there is a rumor or someone saying something about either the Batman versus Superman movie or just anything really, whether it's a movie or video games or comics even. And a lot of times there is no confirmation source. And there are pages which are just fine, the formatting is fine, that, will talk about anything that comes out, even if they're like, this is probably just pure rumor, but this came out today. And since I post more content than just, news, and I try to keep it in a formatted way and kind of on schedule, so I'm not all over the place. I kind of want the page to look organized and kind of, when you look at it, if you're a new follower and we're right in the middle of something, we're right in the middle of talking about a character or talking about a game, that you can jump right in and it makes sense. So when news comes out, I want it to be legitimate. I want either a quote or it's from either a director, producer, a writer, artist. For instance, probably about a month ago, there was a rumor that Frank Miller was coming back with The Dark Knight Returns, the 3rd chapter. And even though it's like that, it could possibly be true. No writer, no artist, no one in the industry, DC Entertainment, no one announced it. It was just, this is what we heard. And even though people said, why aren't you talking about this? I'm like, I'm going to wait for an actual source to come out. And then when C2E2 started, DC Entertainment announced that Frank Miller is coming with this. And it's like, okay, it was true, but I want to, when I say it and I tell people, because a lot of times when I post it, that's the first time they're hearing about it. They don't even hear about it from other places. And I've had people say, she only posts, the news that's real, so this is legitimate. And I kind of like that.
Right. So I wonder if that's a little bit of your art historian roots, because obviously you want accurate reporting.
Accuracy is very important to me. When I write out all of the synopsis and give, the dates and the comic book numbers and all of that, I try my best to make sure all of it is accurate. I don't want to just make up stuff, especially since it's supposed to be a page that kind of gives you information. And you don't want any of that information to be false. Right. So, and yeah, that kind of spawns from doing, all of the research that I did while I was at LMU. I mean, it's like doing mini research every day and kind of putting it on Instagram. But I like that, because even if there's a story that someone's like, I don't like this story, I don't like the way that it played out, I don't like the way it was, drawn or written, it is pretty much how it was created.
Like, you got a lot of complaints about the way Jared Leto looks.
Right, exactly.
By the way, that's Adam, another Adam, who is our silent but deadly co-host. So, sorry, we have to introduce you, my friend, even though you're in the shadows like the Batman. But go on.
But exactly. I mean, there are a lot, and people have opinion, and I don't mind anyone's opinion as long as everyone respects each other's opinion. I don't mind, what they comment or talk and say. But yeah, I'm really big on giving accurate information. So when people go to it and they maybe want to further their research by just actually reading the material or watching the movie or playing the video game or whatever media we're talking about, they can do it and use that kind of as a source to move forward.
Right. So you said you post on Instagram, and that's where can people find that?
If you just, well, even if you just type into Google History of the Batman, it pops up. But if you go to Instagram.com/History of the Batman, all one word.
And now do these posts not only go to Instagram but other social media sites?
All of the Batman sessions that we do go to Tumblr. So that's historyofthebatman.tumblr.com. So if you go there, and I have a Facebook as well. It's not as updated as maybe Instagram and Tumblr, but if you are more comfortable on Facebook and you're more active, just go to facebook.com/History of the Batman and it pops right up.
Are you also on Twitter?
Yep. I'm on twitter.com/hist, HIST of the Batman. Couldn't get the whole word in.
Okay. And so pretty much if anyone that's listening wanted to be up on what's going on with the history of the Batman, they'd search out one of those sites, follow, and you would send out new updates every time.
Yep. I try to keep it as, I try to keep it daily, or at least as updated, or keep the followers in the loop, just if for some reason, I'm not able to post, or I have to take a break, or if something, I really appreciate all of the followers that are on the page, because when I created it 2 years ago, I had no idea that it would grow at all.
Talk a little bit about that. So you created this site. You started with Instagram.
I started with Instagram, yes.
And you did it because it married two of your passions.
Right.
Art, history, and comics. And specifically Batman. By the way, you're wearing a Batman shirt, a Batman pin, and you've got Batman shoes on.
Yes, even if you can't see me, I'm Batman all the time.
Okay. So it's legit. This is a true and legitimate source that is, talking about Batman. So you started with Instagram, and you did it on your own, for your own pleasure. It started just really for me. I didn't create it to try to get a huge following or anything. I wanted to, learn more about a character that I had been reading for years, but kind of in a more constructive and informative way. I mean, I wanted to know when the first time certain characters emerged and when certain artists started and writers. And I got a lot of feedback saying that they like the format, they like how it's in chronological order, they like knowing more about, especially the early years. A lot of people, the 40s and 50s, that's probably the time period where people, know less about, even though that is one of my favorites. The golden age of comics is definitely one of my favorites to talk about just in general. But what is funny is that I guess while I was doing it maybe 2 months in, and I was, crammed with midterms and just life in general, I kind of stalled on the page and I didn't do it for a month. But then I kept receiving all of these comments from people saying, "Where did you go? We're only in 1950. I thought you were going to continue." And that actually was a reinforcement to go, okay, I'll keep going. So did you see the followers increase? Or
when I first started, the first week, I had about 1,000 people.
Oh, 1,000 in the first week?
1,000 in the first week, and that
How
was
many posts got 1,000 followers?
Probably about 15.
Wow.
And I was already shocked at that.
You should be.
And, I didn't know what was, what's a lot and what's not, because, I just had an Instagram just for fun for me, I post my family and, my friends and my dog. I don't really know the, what's a large page and what's popular. But when I stalled, I had probably about 1,400 people, and it just stayed that way. The number didn't rise or fall, but I kept getting people saying, come back and do it. So like about in April of that year, I just continued, and I finished the 50s and the 60s, and I kind of just kept going. And probably by the time I got to the 80s, I suppose, and it was like almost a year in, I had about 30,000. And to me,
Wow.
I was like, this is crazy. I mean, I didn't even know, that's why every day, even if it sounds cheesy or corny or fake to people, I always say thank you so much for following and the support, because you don't have to. No one is forcing anyone to follow or to like or to comment or give all the kind words and everything. And it just grew like rapid fire. After, like I said, after about the 30,000, it would just keep growing and growing and growing. And by last Christmas, it hit 100K.
Whoa. Where are you at right now?
Right now, I think it just is it's at 146,000. 146,000.
Wow.
And I can't I can't even imagine. And so I felt with that, I talk about Batman comics and all the media, but I also love to share artists because my passion is art. And there are so many artists, not just professional, but amateurs, who are either trying to break into the business or that's just a hobby of theirs that they can draw and they want to draw their favorite characters. And I share their work.
Wow.
And a lot of the artists have been so happy to have that kind of exposure, even though to me, I don't, like I said, I still am shocked that the number is still growing, but I feel like it's because of the followers, and I always try to do stuff that kind of, makes them continue to like want to stay, especially like I like to give back, and I'll do small giveaways and things like that from time to time when I can, or even right now, because of the Batman versus Superman Dawn of Justice first trailer released, a lot of people were sending me fan art of the armored Batman, the Batman suit. So I said, let's just do a feature. If you have any artwork based off of any of the characters from that movie, send it in a direct message, and we'll start featuring them. As many as I get, I'll do it a week or every other week. And, I just want to share people's enthusiasm for the film in a different way. I mean,
well, it sounds really quite special, the bond you've kind of formed with these followers.
Right. I don't see them as a number.
Right.
There are a lot of loyal people. Some people told me, I've been following you since you had 2,000 followers. And I'm like, that's insane. You've been following for 2 years. That's, even though it's a social media app and it's fun, that's still, to me, investment somehow.
Right.
That they check daily, that they want to see. I mean, when I don't post on a day, they're like, are you okay?
You got a lot of friends caring for you.
Right. And it's people that are from all around the world, which is crazy. I mean, I get people saying greetings from Australia and greetings from Zimbabwe, and just, it's crazy how much it's been exposed and people enjoy it. And I think the best thing I get out of it is when someone tells me, I've never heard of this story before, and I want to go out and read it. Mm. I mean, one person even told me, I've never even read a comic before, but because of this post, I want to start reading them.
That's great.
And that is like all the reward, that I really would want. I am so appreciative of all of the support that other people outside of the page have given, especially Meltdown and the relationship we've formed. And I think that Meltdown is not just a comic book store. It appeals to everything in pop culture in this industry.
We'll talk about Meltdown in a second, but what I really want to get to, and just maybe even close the point, but just how you respect the followers. And I mean, almost, I don't even know if you'd call them followers, because they almost seem like it's like a own community that you've kind of activated and got excited about comics and Batman. But the respect, I mean, I think it's super cool that you actually thank them.
I do every day. I thank them every day for following, and I try to assure that even the environment, the comments and everything, everyone is respected. Everyone is kind of, friendly, and no one, kind of goes out, because, there are people that become passionate and, want to say things, and opinion is fine. But as I said earlier, as long as everyone respects one another, I'm fine with conversation and debates and all kinds of things. But I just want it to be kind of like a community where people who like Batman can just come and talk about Batman and, enjoy the artwork, enjoy the information, enjoy the other people who are excited as they are.
Well, it sounds like you set the foundation for really an intelligent and fun discussion, right? Because what you seem to have in a lot of these websites, you just have people posting comments and statements, and they're not substantiated, they're rude, it's opinion, everyone's fighting with each other.
Right.
And yours, it seems like, hey, look, here's the basis. We got some historical foundation. Let's lay that out.
Exactly.
And now let's actually talk about it in a fun way.
Right. And even when I talk about news, I try to not be biased. I kind of just give the facts and what it's about, especially even though, for instance, when the Batgirl Joker variant controversy happened and the artist canceled the cover, I talked about it, but I didn't give an opinion. And what everyone else said, they either loved it or they hated it, or this is wrong, or, and I let that discussion go because I think it should be discussed, because it's different. Because with that situation, an outsider who maybe doesn't know the context and why it looks the way it does and what it's from, they may find it offensive, and you don't know that, but if you are, Batman fans like, I am, and know exactly where it's from and why it's a great piece of work and things like that, you have a totally different perspective. And so I like people to, give their different perspectives, even if it's totally different from mine, because I feel like that's not necessarily my job. My opinion, I have tons of opinions, but I like to give facts.
Right.
I think that's the most important, because, if I'm talking about a character that I love, I may be more enthusiastic, writing up that post and maybe other things.
Right.
But, I try to keep it as, everything is kind of on an even playing field as possible. But I let the followers and the people, talk about it amongst themselves.
That sounds great. Have you had any of the followers ask you specifically to review a period or review a certain story or a cover? And
definitely.
Can you talk a little bit about maybe one of those? Give me an example of that.
I had a lot of people want me to talk about Jason Todd, that character. And I first actually did his early years, because a lot of people know him as the Red Hood, which I always find interesting, but they won't know that he was the second Robin after Dick Grayson. And so I said, okay, I'll talk about Jason Todd. And I dedicated a week, and it was called Jason Todd, the Boy Wonder. And just that progression of him being introduced and his background and how he was kind of a carbon copy of Dick Grayson, and how, pretty much Dick Grayson got older and he joined the Teen Titans, and then he, took up the persona as Nightwing and all of that. But yeah, a lot of people, they'll do requests, and I take that into consideration. If I have something planned out, already, like, then I'm going to do it. But if people are like, oh, I want to, learn more about this, then I jot that down. I'm like, okay, that's something. And yeah, I definitely take it into consideration, or I'll even have the followers involved in how the next session goes. Like, I think the most fun I did, was I had a post, and I said, just name your favorite Batman the Animated Series episode. And there were probably about 400 comments in there, but I went through every single one and tallied them up, and I did a top 10. Wow. And so that whole week, I just, went through each episode, talked about, when it came out, and what it's about and why it's probably a favorite. So I like to involve the followers and things like that too, because they liked it. And that was one of probably the best weeks that they enjoyed, I think. Me too.
Yeah, it sounds fun. A lot of TV watching, I'm sure, also.
Yeah, but that's not work to me.
Right. Well, so that brings me to the next question. How do you actually do the research?
Oh, it depends. I either, either have the comics or I have them through either online or myself, or I have trade paperbacks, or I try to actually read the comic as much as possible to give as much of a detailed analysis as possible. Sometimes I'll use outside sources just to give the in general, like, writer, penciler, inker that I may not know off the top of my head, and to assure that I have accurate information. But just all different types of sources, from online to out of the library to out of my own library. It just depends, articles, journals, just either blog pieces. But I try to put that even as a source, even though I don't have to. I put it at the end of each caption just in case, like, if you want to know where I got this from, or like any type of pieces, you can go and look at it yourself. But I always recommend read the actual material. That's the better thing. That'll be way more, informative than anything that I could ever say in a general sense.
So the early stuff, how did you actually do the reading on that? Did you go, what books, how did you get those books?
I love the Batman Chronicles trade paperback series, which is...
Are those the black and white ones?
The
old, thick ones?
No. I have to have it in color.
Okay.
It really... Oh. It bothers me to see it black and white, because I'm like, no, this isn't...
It's not the way it was presented.
It's not the way it was presented. Because I've seen those, and I always figured, okay, they have all of it. But no, it's it's just called the Batman Chronicles, and it's had about 12 volumes. But yeah, it literally gives an exact chronology of Batman comics. So in the early ones, that's what I used. And I had a lot of different books on kind of the golden age, because that's a period I'm most interested in, is the golden age. So the 40s and the 50s. So I had like the big DC volume, the silver age of DC comics, and not just talks about Batman, but all of the DC heroes, Superman.
So you'll read the comic books. Do you read the actual print books that describe or go over like how Batman...
Right. I'll read any book or material that kind of will give me more insight to what I'm actually reading about. So as much as I can. But for the most part, going kind of in the chronological order, it was just kind of doing the comics and picking out the ones that are the most important. Like when you first, see Julie Madison, when you first are introduced to the Joker and Catwoman, when you're first introduced to Two-Face, and kind of all of those characters, the Penguin, that are all, were really the main reoccurring rogues during that time. So the sources kind of come from everywhere, but I try to get it, like I said, accuracy is key.
The online app has made the older comics a lot more accessible.
Right.
The iPad with the DC Comics
app. The DC Comics app is like one of my best friends. I use it all the time. And especially since Batman had his 75th anniversary last year, they had all of the older issues kind of for free.
Oh,
I don't know if a lot of people didn't know that, but that was, a great source. And it's, even though it's digitalized and everything, the colors are so crisp, and, and you can zoom in on the panels and all of that.
Actually, really I'm a big fan of the digital comic too. Yeah. I love the print. I love the book. I'll always buy it.
Right.
But I do love the digital experience as well.
Because sometimes the digital experience is way better, because it's kind of unfortunate when you open up you're on a page, and then, something is happening and you can already see what's about to happen next because it's on the next page. Whereas with digital comics, you can swipe to your own pace and you can already have that kind of surprise of what's on the next page. But with print, even though I love print is still my favorite. Sometimes the digital
panel
comics,
to panel is a nice thing.
Yes.
So are you, I know it's a crazy question and I already know the answer, but are you current on your Batman titles?
I'm trying to be as much as possible. The DC universe has been crazy with convergence and everything, but I did stay up to date with Batman and Detective Comics. I actually just read Batman 40 that came out this week at the conclusion of Endgame, which was fantastic. I think Snyder and Capullo really did a great job with wrapping that up, and how Batman and Joker's relationship, it was a big, shocker for everyone, the ending, but it kind of still calls back to the relationship that they have been sharing for the past 75 years, it kind of all culminated right into that last, scene.
So what current DC Batman related universe titles are you trying to keep up with as best as possible?
I've always been a fan of Batgirl. I'm wearing Batgirl shirt, even though you can't see it. But I like Batgirl, and I'm a huge fan of I like the Catwoman, even though people have kind of like a little thing about it. And then those pretty much Batman, Detective Comics, Batgirl, Catwoman, those are my main ones. And then, I like Superman and try to keep up with Action Comics. And, I liked the Green Lantern Corps when it was, current and things like that. And I had a lot in my pull box, and then it just kind of got overwhelming with other stuff. Right. So it's hard to try to keep up, but I try to keep up as current as possible, especially with issues that came out this week that are kind of really big deal, and it kind of makes you think about all of the past comics before with these characters. But yeah, so I try to keep up with different ones for DC, and then I try to keep up with Marvel and then Image and just different. It just depends.
You're a busy woman.
Oh, I don't sleep.
Right. And you're also a preschool teacher.
I'm a preschool teacher, yes.
So you do that during the day, comics and posts at night.
Pretty much.
Oh, man. Well, that is very impressive. Obviously, it shows a lot of dedication to something that you clearly love and clearly that your fans appreciate.
Yeah. It's just a fan page that just grew. But everyone, when they say, when people are surprised, I think, which I always find funny, is that I'll talk to them. If they comment to me, I'll respond, or I'll respond to a message. If they want to show me, their new tattoo or their new art or a new t-shirt they got, or just anything, or even just saying, I really like this page, and I'll respond. They're like, whoa, you have such a big page. I didn't think you would respond. I'm like, we're all fans, and no one's better than anyone else.
So do your fans currently know that you're doing a podcast?
No, I have not announced that to them yet. So.
Wow, what a nice surprise.
No one knows yet, except pretty much the people in this room.
Okay, well, we'll get this together and get this out to them, because I'm sure they're going to be excited to hear a little bit about this. Talk real quick about, you mentioned pull box, so obviously you buy comic books.
Right.
And we are sitting here in Hollywood, California, at the famous Meltdown Comics on Sunset Strip. Talk a little bit about how you came to be a customer, a fan, and a basic family member of Meltdown.
Well, I would just come, even though I'm currently in Culver City, that's where I live, I would love to go to the small events you guys had, and I just loved the store in general. Just walking in, it felt like almost like an art gallery to me, with all of the posters and the comics and just the toys and the merchandise. It felt very, comforting, because every comic book store, it's like stacks on stacks and stacks of books, and, every store is designed differently. But I felt that how Meltdown, is kind of, it's right on Sunset. It's kind of more like a pop culture store than just comics. You can get comics, you can get a pull box at, here and everything, and you can come weekly. But I always felt that, Meltdown could always give more to, especially the people that follow the page. And so, especially when you guys had, guests come, especially Grant Morrison, that was probably the most memorable for me, because I am a huge fan of his work, and I've never got to talk to or meet him at a con or anything like that. And, I loved his book, Super Gods, and I'm just a fan of all of his work. And so when there's opportunities like that, I feel like people should be able to experience that. Right. You guys don't just do comics, you do just everything.
Yeah.
And I really enjoyed that. And then, once I got to start talking to you guys and you guys are so supportive of the page, I just really liked pretty much the family that Meltdown has. And that's how it feels like. It's not just, two people running a store and just trying to get people to buy their merchandise. They're really invested into getting people in. And, I really liked that dynamic. So,
yeah, I think we look at it as kind of like a community center for
right.
pop culture participants,
right?
Where you can kind of
exactly.
do your own thing and feel accepted and empowered to expand.
Right, exactly.
So which brings me to my next point. So the plan that we've got right now is that we're going to start doing some podcasts with you on a weekly basis, and it's going to be, like we said, the history of the Batman. So what can we look forward to? What do you hope to be able to bring to your fans and to do with this wonderful opportunity to actually connect?
Well, I feel that even though I try to give as much information in each caption as possible, there is a limit. And with some, with pretty much any topic in the Batman mythos, you can go on and really dive into the actual material. And I feel that with each session, even right now, talking about the Joker and celebrating his 75th anniversary, even though each thing we've been going in chronological order and highlighting, his biggest, comics and, live action and movies and television, all of that, I think kind of diving more into it and giving more almost, a description about what you're seeing and, kind of expanding more on why this particular comic or movie or TV series or video game or whatever it is, or this time period was so crucial or important to understanding more about Batman, who I'm figuring is one of everyone's favorite characters who follows the page. So I think people can get more information and learn more. And I think it's more exciting to maybe, hear, the information pour out than just having to scroll and read it. It's kind of more inviting. It becomes more personal because, like I said, I really do appreciate all of the followers, and I don't just see them as numbers. I see them as people, and I feel like I can just, even though they may not be talking back, I can talk to them and kind of show more of my enthusiasm for the content that I share every day.
Well, I definitely see the enthusiasm visually, but I can feel it as well. And I'm very excited that Meltdown can host you and give you this platform in which to really connect with the fans, because obviously we love your fans too. I mean, they are, pop culture fans, I can assume, and
right.
We want to invite them as well
Definitely.
into the family of Meltdown, into the history of Batman. So before we close and this session, this episode session, I don't know what that means, but this podcast, just give us a little hint of kind of what you're going to provide, and I want to ask you about the topic that you already discussed and just get a little bit more information, because I want some context to it. So you mentioned the Batman cover, or the Batgirl cover, with
right.
Joker standing right behind her.
Right.
And if you could maybe describe that cover and talk a little bit about the context and kind of give the fans a hint of how you'll be addressing topics in the upcoming episodes.
Okay, well, that cover was for... Well, first off, in June, DC Comics is celebrating Joker by having 25 different Joker variant covers for all of the publications. And one was for Batgirl number 41. And it was by artist Raphael Albuquerque. And pretty much it is in a black background. And you see Joker, who's in his pretty much, pink hat and flowered, kind of almost vacation-like outfit, having his fingers pointed to, as shaped as a gun, to Batgirl's face, and it's creating a bloody smile. And the way that the Joker looks and the way that he is, presented to Batgirl and their stance, it is paying homage to Alan Moore's Batman, The Killing Joke, which is a one-shot graphic novel from 1988, and it had art by Brian Boland. And what that references, and is one of the most important Joker, I suppose, stories probably ever written thus far, is it not only gives Joker's origin story, but in the comic, Joker shoots and paralyzes Barbara Gordon, who at the time was Batgirl, which ultimately had to have her retire as Batgirl. And even though it brought the amazing character Oracle, for it was not only when The Killing Joke was published, it was controversial, but I guess with the creative team of Batgirl right now, with Cameron Stewart and Babs Tarr and Brendan Fletcher, it's very lighthearted and optimistic. And she's young, and she's, she lives in like the hip town part of Gotham. And I guess the vibe, I suppose, with that and her stories that the first, several issues I presented with this cover rubbed people the wrong way, because it calls back to Joker's story where he pretty much violates her and, takes away something that was really important to, I think, a lot of female readers of DC at the time, because Batgirl was such an inspirational and important character, and then it's kind of stripped away by and this awful act of violence. But I guess looking at it from a historical sense and an artistic sense, the cover, in my opinion, was something that, the homage was just perfect. It, represented, it's celebrating Joker's 75 years. And within that 75 years, he has done terrible things. And that is why, he's a villain. He's not a hero. He's not the good guy. He's the bad guy. And that story was really important to not just, setting a status quo for Batgirl, but for Batman, because that story was one of the most awful for him, and it brought such a psychological toll on him. And with, when everyone went to Twitter and did hashtag change the cover and was attacking DC and the artists and the creative team because people just felt insulted by this work and they took it down, it was kind of unfortunate, because it's a piece of art that represents a very important part of Joker's history, and that's what these variant covers are supposed to show. So, I couldn't go into, like I said, I don't really do opinion really on the blog, but I can kind of go into more of my viewpoint and kind of give more context as to why maybe this cover was important.
Right. Now the artist took down the cover on his own. Is that accurate?
Right. He pretty much went to DC and said, in general sense, I did not expect this response. I don't want to disrespect anybody, so I'm asking DC to take down the cover, and DC.
Was there also an issue about communication to the artist? Because I understood that maybe the story was written and the cover artist didn't have access to the story and was just told to do a certain piece in homage to the Alan Moore cover.
Right. Pretty much, I think, from what I read, the artist, he chose that because it was Batgirl. And I think it really didn't, it wasn't necessarily that it had to match, whatever story was in Batgirl 41, but just that's what he wanted, he chose to represent. We've seen other covers and, they might not be as violent or, kind of connect to something, as kind of, that kind of upsets people even still today, the story itself. But I think just in general, the artist just didn't, I think he didn't expect all of the kind of threats that DC was receiving and kind of just the negative feedback, And like I said, some people from the outside, they might not understand the connection, but then the people who are fans or have read it, they're like, this is awesome.
Right.
It's kind of, it
wasn't so much about the story. It was more about the Batman mythos in general.
Right, exactly. It wasn't just about, but I think just because I mean, this is just my opinion. I think just in general that this Batgirl before, Gail Simone ended her run, and it was kind of more darker, it was kind of a dark story. And this one's very light and airy and fun. And then I think, it's a variant cover, and it's not necessarily the cover that's going to be on, the regular one. But, people were, protesting and saying, I'm not going to buy your comic if you post this because, it's disrespectful. And it was a surprising controversy to me. But reading things nowadays, I think any little thing that people aren't necessarily fully comfortable with kind of sets them off.
Right.
And, some things, give people more of a tick than others.
Okay. Well, that is, this is great stuff. So what can we look forward to in the next podcast? What do you think we'll be talking about in the next episode?
Well, since I kind of wanted to give the same thing that I'm doing right now, a week ago today, Batman #1 from April 25th of 1940 was published, and the Joker made his first appearance, and it marks 75 years. And I really wanted to just, kind of give almost a crash course on Joker and why even today he's still one of the most iconic figures in Batman's history, and why he as a character is probably one of the most important to Batman, and how they coexist and how they kind of are mirrors of each other, and how you can see that with all of the comics and the films and the movies and the television series and all of that, and just show that Joker isn't just a random bad guy. He is someone that really reflects on what Batman represents in the DC universe.
Well, that is exciting. I'm excited for the next episode, and I hope the listeners are excited as we are. So I would say that if you are listening to this live or within the week that it is put online, tune in next week. And if you are binge listening, well, then get ready to reload the next episode, because I think it's time we get into a little bit of the Joker, and I'm excited to do so.
I'm excited too.
So I'd like to shout out your fans, because I think it's amazing what they've done in supporting you, and I'm excited to on behalf of Meltdown to present them with this look into the history of the Batman.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to get more into Batman, and to hopefully have the followers do more and listen more.
Okay, great. So thank you all very much. This is Adam. You just heard from Londyn, and Shadow Adam as well. And we will see you or hear you or listen to you, or you'll be listening to us, next week when we go over the Joker. This has been the History of the Batman presented by Meltdown Comics and Collectibles. Thank you for listening.